Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Doug, so you've got a pretty big portfolio, right?
Well, 81 doors. I don't know if it's pretty big, but yep, it's 81 doors.
Did you know what you were doing when you got started, or did you just kind of figure it out as you went along?
We've been flying by the seat of our pants for 15 years.
Have you? And did you have a lot of money for down payments? I mean, that's a lot of down payments to buy 81 doors. Did you have a lot of money when you were getting started?
You know, we didn't.
This sounds like it's going to be a pretty incredible story. Doug had no real estate experience. He had no money, but he somehow figured out how to buy 81 rentals. And on the show today, we're going to walk through exactly how he built his portfolio. Joining us on the show today from Lansing, Michigan is Doug Benson. We'll take a really quick break. We'll thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Doug. Whether you've been buying rental properties for years or you're looking to buy your very first rental property, the very first thing you want to do before you go out and find a great deal is to figure out your financing. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. Chaley has a special limited time offer just for our listeners. She will pay for your appraisal up to $500 when you close a loan with her. Just mention you heard about this on the Rental Income Podcast. If you want more details or if you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE. lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. A good deal on a rental property isn't going to last very long. To win properties today, you need to move quickly when a deal comes on the market, but it takes time to analyze a property. I want to let you know about an app where you can analyze deals on your phone in seconds. It's called Ask Rick, that's RIC for Rental Income Calculator. You can analyze a deal with the push of a button. You can figure out the rent, your mortgage payment, your expenses, and figure out the cash flow. If the numbers make sense, you can make an offer right there on the app, or you can send a calendar invite to your agent to see the property in person. Ask Rick is currently offering a free 7-day trial. Just search for Ask Rick in the App Store or go to Just Ask Rick. That's RIC. JustAskRick.com. Playing the board game Monopoly is what got you first interested in buying rentals?
I know that sounds crazy, but that really made me believe that adult Monopoly might be twice as fun. We just couldn't ever make any deals work. You know, I'd put together a bunch of spreadsheets and, you know, Debbie'd bring these deals to me and I just could never make them work until one day she found a 4-unit. And it was one that friends of her brothers were trying to sell this 4-unit so they could use that money and seed another business that they wanted to run. And that one, surprisingly enough, we were able to get it inexpensive enough and the rents were enough that it made a couple bucks every month. So that's kind of how it started.
Awesome. So you found that building. Now, how did you buy it? Like, did you have the cash sitting around for a down payment, or how did you finance that building?
No, we really didn't. Leading up to that point in time, Deb and I have been kind of house hacking. We purchased our first house when I was 21 and she was 20, right? So we were very comfortable buying and selling houses, and this was in the 2000s, so it was pretty easy to make a buck or two, or at least have some equity in your house. And so our fourth house is the one that we're still living in. So that house had a pretty nice equity position when we were all done with it. And so we took equity out against our house to use as a down payment to buy this 4-unit building. And back then the banks were giving 90% loan to value. So, you know, I don't mind telling you some of the financials here. This building was like $99,000. So 10% of that was only around $10,000 down. So I took a $10,000 equity pull against my house, and we used that as the down payment. And since it was 4-unit, we were able to just get a normal, boring residential mortgage on it.
You know, I think that's a key point to figure out, that the money is always there. Like, you can always find it somewhere. In your case, it was in your house, but for someone else, maybe it's in their 401k. Maybe they could take a 401k loan, or maybe they have friends or family that they could borrow money from. But for some reason, when you're taking money out of your house or your 401k, it sometimes feels a little bit more risky. Did it feel risky to you taking that money out of your house?
It actually didn't, and I think the reason it didn't was twofold. We spend a lot of time doing due diligence on the numbers, so we were pretty comfortable that this was a good deal. And secondly, our equity position, our house, 10,000 wasn't really putting us up against a hard place.
Mm-hmm.
And we were both working at the time, so we both felt like if this just completely breaks, we know we could sell it, we could recover, we could pay back that 10,000. So it probably was riskier than having $10,000 laying around,
right?
But we simply didn't have it laying around.
So, all right, so you got that 4-unit up and running, and then how long did it take you before you bought your next property?
It was probably a year and a half.
Okay.
We started to realize that the reason our deals weren't working is because we were looking at like single family houses or duplexes, which are always kind of a tight squeeze. But we started looking at the numbers that go with larger buildings. And so Deb and I were hunting around. We were looking for, again, following the rules of her family, we were looking for a lot of 1-bedroom apartments because her family always felt that children destroyed apartment buildings. Probably a half a mile away, I found 16 units sitting there, and I looked up the owner of those units. I cold called this guy. It all worked out wonderfully, but we ended up in a year and a half buying 16 1-bedroom units up on the south side of Lansing.
Wow. Okay. So now you're at 20 units with your 4-plex and your 16 unit, and you said they were all 1-bedrooms?
They were all 1-bedrooms. I had 20 1-bedroom apartments.
Now, you mentioned about children destroying the apartment. Like that was something that someone had told you. Do you find that to be true, that kids are bad for apartments?
I didn't. In fact, I've found the opposite. If you really think about what causes people to want to stay in any place is normally the children, right, and the school district and the social lives of their children. So what we've discovered is that kids are a very powerful anchor to families, and they don't destroy buildings. I mean, I've had adults cause me way more grief than a child ever has,
right.
With buildings. So the only thing kids have going against them is, geez, they just don't know how to act like 70-year-olds when it comes to being quiet,
Right,
but
sure.
There's some people that live to hear that child happiness. So, so that's what opened up our eyes to the 2-bedroom unit. And of course, then we discovered that more professional people, they always want that second bedroom for either clothing or an office or having guests over. So that really changed our perspective of how to invest.
Now, to go from a 4-unit to a 16 unit, that's a pretty big leap. Like, did you know, like, I guess, like, were the principles the same in running a 4-plex versus running a 16-plex? Like, say when you were buying it, like, was it a big hassle to maybe like inspect all the units?
Oh, let me tell you, thank God we were as ignorant as we were, because we didn't inspect all the units. And I'm being facetious when I say thank God. That was a huge mistake. We didn't even know to inspect the units. We looked at one unit that was vacant. The other 15 had people in them. They were kind of run down. They weren't really taken very good care of. They were old. So what ended up happening is, if you're I don't want to say a bad owner, but if you're an owner that's not putting a lot back into his buildings, you let carpets go for a very long time. And carpets can get awful.
Oh,
so there were many units were just in terrible shape, but we didn't know.
Right.
So we didn't know to put together, a CapEx stack, a capital stack. We just weren't thinking those thoughts.
But but it all worked out. I think that's like
all worked out.
That's the amazing thing that
it's like with every house we bought, the next house that we purchased was a much smarter purchase. With every building that we purchased after those 16 units, it was always, we had a much greater vision for how the building needed to look. in order to compete in the marketplace.
Now, for the financing of that building, where did you get the down payment for that building?
Well, again, I know I feel like a broken record, but that one was also an equity pull. Again, we're looking, we're talking 90% loan to value. So I had to come up with 10% of the money, which was a substantial amount that, again, I did not have, but the 4-unit that we bought was by now running very nicely, making a very good return. So we knew that we could do that. We knew that we, had the chaps to do that. So even though it was almost 5 times larger on an equity pull, we felt very comfortable doing that.
So that was equity you were pulling out of the house that you lived in?
Yes.
Right.
Yep,
Okay.
the house that we lived in.
Awesome.
And around that same year, maybe the following year, we started flipping houses. We started doing short sales. So now we were able to come up with our own money to help us purchase future buildings. But yeah, the first 2 were all based off home equity loan.
All right. So now you've got 2 buildings. How long did it take you before you bought your third property from that 16 building?
That probably happened 4 years later.
4 years. Okay. Wow.
Yep.
Why did you wait?
Happened.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
See, I was just going to ask why you waited 4 years.
Well, we had a lot of things obviously going on in our life. We were busy flipping houses. We were busy trying to wrestle down these 16 units and get them up and running and functional. And we also didn't really have good enough deals present themselves to us. We're always been local investors. So we invest, like the furthest building from where I live is maybe 12 miles away. But we ended up stumbling across where, believe it or not, it was a family member that owned a 12-unit building, and he was very frustrated with that. And so he wanted out. And we talked with him, and so we ended up making an agreement. We'd purchase his building from him. That was a 12-unit building that was actually just down the street.
So yeah. So your family member was having trouble with that building. Was it a ton of work to turn it around and to have things, I guess, to get better tenants, or what did you need to do to turn that building around?
Well, that building, when we were first exposed to it, only had 5 of the 12 units rented. And of the 5 units, I believe 4 of the units were all family. So they're all they were sort of running the building themselves. There was some electrical issues going on in that building. People would take a shower and they'd feel an electric shock while they're standing in the shower. And that's something that this family member had been trying to cure and trying to fix for years. And Debbie, my wife, did some reading, and she found that sometimes the transistors that are up on telephone poles, that they operate sloppily and they give off EMFs. They give off electromagnetic frequency. And I know this sounds like something out of science fiction, but the copper in the building was actually acting like an antenna, and it was capturing these EMF waves coming off this transistor. And so we had an electrician out there, and he shut off the power to the entire building. And he put a meter on a water line, and you could see that there was 9 volts of electricity running through the water line.
It's unbelievable.
Even though there was no juice whatsoever going to the building. So, again, it was Deb that discovered it. We put a phone call into the utility company, and that problem that had existed for years, 20 or 30 years, was taken care of in 20 or 30 hours.
Wow. That's great.
Over a short period of time, we were able to get the building up and running very nicely. And it's a wonderful building now. Now,
with financing that building, you bought it from your family member. Did they finance it for you too?
Yeah, they offered us some seller financing. We carried that for maybe a couple of years. And then we were introduced to a friend who was a bank loan officer, and we refinanced with him and paid off the family member, and bada bing, bada boom. Now it's just a boring bank loan.
So to get into that property, did you need any money, or were you able to finance the whole purchase?
we were able to finance all of it. Again, the equity position was very strong. In his mind, it was a refinance, not so much a finance. He had his appraisers come out, and we were in a good enough equity position that we just were able to get the note.
That's awesome. Okay, so your first two properties, you needed to borrow money from your house, but then for that third property, you got into that with no money.
No money at all. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, and then how long did it take to go from there to your next property?
Probably about 18 months.
Okay.
We were looking at another 12 unit that was in bankruptcy court. And we offered just a scant more than what the bankruptcy court was asking. And to this day, I've had people try to ridicule me about that. But the point is I was able to buy it. You know, there's a bunch of people that maybe offered asking price that don't own that building. I offered $2,000 more than asking price, and I got the building. So
right, that's all that matters.
Yeah, that really is all that matters. So by this point in time, we had our own money that we could use through flipping houses. And again, I do very boring financing. I do, 20% down, let the bank carry the balance. Just, standard commercial notes. And so we were able to get that building immensely inexpensive, which freed up an awful lot of money that we could then pour into that building and make it very nice. And we did. We did, the classic new doors, floors, cabinets, counters, appliances, paint, and it's gorgeous. So yeah, so that building's still with us. We, as you'll find, we've never sold anything. We are the quintessential buy and hold investors.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Right, so then for your next purchase, how long did it take from that building until you bought your next one?
Our next one was probably 4 years later. We bought that in 2015. It was maybe 300 feet away. It was 20 two-bedroom units. Actually, technically, it's 17 two-bedroom units, 2 three-bedroom units, and a single one-bedroom unit. But it was a 20-unit building. And we had been staring at that building. Like I said, it's only 300 feet away. And Debbie and I had always said, geez, that would be the perfect solution for us when people get too big to live, at Alpha Street, which is all the one bedrooms. They could easily move to the 2-bedroom place. And suddenly it came on the market. So, you know how fast you have to move on this stuff. So we quickly made arrangements to see it. We ended up getting it. We discovered later there were a lot of people tried to get that building, but we were able to move fast and we got there first. And so that was a big fun achievement to take down that 20-unit building. Yeah. It helped us across the board. And by then we'd already had a pretty good idea of what it would take to turn every unit. And we did. We turned all 20 units. Actually, that's not true. We turned 18 units. I still have 2 units that to this day have not been turned because the original tenants are still there. But we did all new windows, doors, floors, cabinet, you name it. And that's been a wonderful building to have on our inventory.
And that property, it sounds like you turned it around pretty quickly, where just a few years earlier, when you bought your 12 unit, that took you years to get that property stabilized.
Yeah, so, that you're exactly right. We hired a person. We met a person through running an ad that we needed to do a turn. And so we had one guy turned one unit and another guy turned a different unit. And we stayed with the one that we liked the most. And he ended up becoming our maintenance guy for like 6 years. So he helped us because that same year, 6 months later, we bought another 17 units that became available. So we all of a sudden had 37 units. And when we buy stuff, we are Class C apartment investors. So we buy buildings that are kind of tired, kind of wore out, kind of had it. And we try to make them as beautiful as we can to win in the marketplace. And this guy turned, I don't know, we had 37 units to turn. I'll bet he turned 30 of them. We had another friend that maybe turned 4 or 5 of them. But yeah, that's all we did for about 2 years was turn apartment units. As the minute they became vacant, we do a full turn and throttle up the rents and get a much better caliber of tenants in the building and resurrect both these places.
So for that 20 unit and the 17 unit, as far as financing, was that money coming from when you were doing flips?
So all the while that we'd been flipping houses, we had a couple of friends and acquaintances that would lend us money to do the house flips, and we'd pay them back. And we did it enough times that they were very easy for me to approach and say, "Hey, what do you guys think about doing a multifamily?" And they both thought, "Yeah, that sounds great." So we borrowed money from each of them for the down payment. And we approached the bank, and the bank said, "Hey, I don't care where your down payment's coming from. You've got a track record. I know you're going to turn this building into a real nice economic engine. So yeah, just as long as these guys don't have first possession, that's going to be reserved for us." And so we drew up a couple promissory notes, a couple mortgages, second mortgages to these lender friends of ours. And that was my second no money down building that we purchased. We made payments to them for 2 years to pay off the note. Again, we refinanced the building, cashed them all out, and now we have that beautiful building as part of our inventory.
That's great. That's great. So it took 6 transactions to get to 81 rental units. And if you flash forward to today, what are those rentals doing for you? Like, do the rentals pay all your bills and support you today?
Absolutely. You remember me talking about the equity loans. Everything is paid off. The home equity loan, the home mortgage, my 4-unit building, that's paid off. The other buildings, we are leveraging them for equity to make our next purchase. So yes, we are doing fine.
That is great.
It's from just 81 units. Yeah.
That is really incredible. You found 6 really good deals, and you're in a really good spot now for the rest of your life. I mean, that's really, really awesome. And do you ever think down the road that not only are you set for the rest of your life, but these buildings could be in your family forever?
Well, that's kind of how I'm living. I've spoke with some other people about their goals, and their goals are always to have everything paid off before they're put in the ground. And I begin to think about, gee, I wonder if General Motors is thinking like that, or Xerox, or 3M, or Apple, or Microsoft. I'm not saying I'm anything like those companies, right. But at the same time, does a company have to have zero debt when the owner passes? And if you get comfortable that no, they don't, suddenly now you're building something that can last forever. Now you're making smart borrowing decisions. You're making smart purchases to increase value. You're putting money into the asset with the goal of it lasting, like you're saying, forever. I would love I know a couple of my children are very interested in helping out to run these buildings. I'm hoping that some of my grandkids think that this is kind of a fun, decent, good thing. What we're proud about is that I believe the neighborhoods that we've invested in, they were all decent neighborhoods, but not great neighborhoods. I believe we moved them closer to great than they were before we got there. Some of our buildings were really in trouble. And I mean really in trouble. They're the kind of building that you wouldn't feel real good parking there at night, getting out of your car and going up to the building. Now, none of that's the case. And I'm not saying it's just because of us, but I'm saying that I believe that we've made these neighborhoods better because we've been there. And that's, a lot of that is in our own self-interest, but it's also for the community benefit. So I think these buildings can be around for a long time, and I think they ought to be around for a long time. As part of our legacy. So that's my hope.
If anybody wants to reach out to Doug or you want to check out his website, I've got links to everything on my website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 322. If Doug inspired you and you're ready to buy your first rental or you want to add to your portfolio, the lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors buy rental properties. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she has a special right now that if you do a loan with her, she will pay up to $500 for your appraisal. If you want to get more details or you want to talk to Chaley personally, you can track her down at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE, lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. Make sure you subscribe. We put out new interviews every single Tuesday. And if you subscribe, you'll get notified as soon as they come out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.